Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first ever John Fredericks podcast. This is Trump This, a look inside the Trump campaign in 2024 to save America. We're going to be doing one of these several times a week, kind of get you up to speed, and we're going to bear it all. It's going to be the good, it's going to be the bad, it's going to be the ugly. Like always, we're going to call people out, and we're going to tell you the truth. The main thing is we got one guy to save America, and that's President Trump. And we're doing these podcasts because we want to get at the truth so we don't turn into the debacle campaign we had in 2020. We certainly don't want a repeat of that. Now, on the first show that I'm having, there was only one possible guest that I could ever have. There was only one choice to make. If you're going to have your first podcast on Trump This, you've got to have as guest the first person ever hired by President Trump to start his campaign, his historic campaign in 2015. With me now is Corey Lewandowski. Corey was the campaign manager for the Trump for President campaign during the entire cycle from January of 2015 all the way up through the convention in Cleveland. Now, Corey turned the lights on in this campaign. He was recruited personally by President Trump to move from New Hampshire to go to New York, Trump Tower. And on January 2nd, he came in to his office, which had plywood floors, one desk, a phone, and two lights in the office that were hanging from the ceiling. It was an unfinished floor. That is how the Trump campaign started. At 1%, with no one thinking that he had a chance. In just 18 months, Donald J. Trump walked into Cleveland and became the nominee of the Republican Party in 2016 against all odds. The guy that engineered it, who engineered the entire primary victory, this strategy, to win the most historic campaign in history, that no one thought even was a serious campaign, who got outspent about, when you add it all up, about 150 to 1. Remember, Scott Walker blew through $150 million before he even got to New Hampshire. He dropped out. Remember the money that Marco Rubio spent. Remember the money that Jeb Bush raised, $180 million. He didn't make it out of New Hampshire either. I could go on and on. Corey won this thing with about $30 million. And so we've asked him to join us today to figure out how to recapture what he did. Corey Lewandowski, thanks for joining us.
John, it's a pleasure. And you've been so generous with your kind words. You know, most people don't know, John, you were there from the beginning. And a lot of people don't remember that, John. A lot of people in this business over the last 8 years have revisionist history, how they tell us that they were there, how they were part of this when it began. But the truth is, John, there are very, very few of us who were there in January and February and March of 2015, long before Donald Trump came down that golden escalator, long before he got into this race. You were one of them, and you've never wavered. And you know what? That's a testament to you, and it's a testament to the person you are, and it's a testament to why, you know, the Trump campaign is so lucky to have you out talking about the successes that they've been able to achieve through the president's time in office.
You know, it was early in February. You called me. You were a senior executive at Americans for Prosperity, and I remember the phone rang, and we had talked many times. Obviously, when you were part of AFP for different things, and the phone rang, and you started telling me about what you were doing in the campaign. And of course, I'm a protectionist, and in the fall before that, I had gotten President Trump to cut ads for me that we ran through a PAC that I worked on with Curtis Ellis called the American Jobs Alliance. We got $1 million from one of the labor organizations to run ads against TPP. And so we got him to do that. This was well before you were there in the campaign. And so you called me up, and you were giving me, I guess, your reasons for backing President Trump, and asked me if I would if I would come on. And you had a whole thing, you had a whole spiel written, And I cut you off and I said, Corey, you had me at hello. I mean, basically, I was in from the beginning. So you're right there. When you go back to that campaign in 2015, that you basically started yourself with the president, I want to get back to what was different about that than 2020, and how do we recapture that? And what is going to be a very tough fight, Corey, in 2024?
You know, John, in 2015, when we started, it's the equivalent of a mom and pop shop starting a small business and hoping that they are successful, right? In 2020, it was the equivalent of coming in and being the CEO of Google. You know, when you look at just the sheer size of the campaign on election day of 2016, when Donald Trump became the president-elect of the United States, we had about 240 or 250 full-time employees. At the height of the 2020 campaign, there were over 2,000 full-time people working. John, the difference became in 2016, we were a small meritocracy, a group of individuals who weren't there to enrich themselves in Donald Trump, who weren't there to get fame or fortune. They were there to change the country for the better, because we believed then that Donald Trump was the right person for the job. And I think when you fast forward to 2020, you saw that the Donald Trump campaign was much more aligned with where Hillary Clinton was in 2016, this big bloated bureaucracy where people thought that they could travel around in black cars and private jets and that they were owed something because they were on the campaign. That individuals who worked for the campaign had bodyguards and, traveled with full-time staffers and 3 and 4 and 5 assistants. John, in 2016, there were really, the truth be told, for an extended period of time, from the time I started in January of 15 all the way through really January of 16, the total staff in all 3 states, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and the national staff in New York, probably total 23 or 24 people. To put that in perspective, John, that looks like maybe a full congressional race or a full governor's race or a decent sized Senate race in a large state. But we were small, we were lean. We had a candidate who wanted to work every single day harder than anybody else. And we had a staff who was willing to do the same thing. And I say this with admiration because I've been on many campaigns. I think people in 2020 lost their way, John. They saw themselves working out of these big palatial offices in Arlington, Virginia, with black car services available, where everyone telling them how important they were because they were running the re-election campaign of the president of the United States. John, I've done a lot of races. I've had the privilege to do a successful presidential race here in this country. I had the privilege to go over to Israel and work for Benjamin Netanyahu when he was successful, not this last election, but the one before that. So I've had the chance to do some amazing things. The notion that of entitlement that I saw in the 2020 campaign, I think was the giant divide between where 16 was and where 20 was.
Corey, I'm glad you mentioned that, because when you look at the 2020 campaign, there was a lot of grift going on there. I mean, I want people to really grasp what happened, because the story is never told. This campaign in 2020 raised about $1.2 billion in total. Mm-hmm. And they ran out of money at the middle of October. The first week in October, they ran out of cash. How do you raise $1.2 billion and not manage it and run out of money with 3 weeks remaining? As a result of that, they had to take ads down in Phoenix, in Arizona. They had to take ads down in Georgia. They had to take ads down in Pittsburgh and Middle Pennsylvania. They had to cancel ads in Milwaukee, all states that we ended up losing. Then, when it came time to drive the lawsuits for election integrity, well, they didn't have any money to pay the big time election lawyers. So they ended up with local lawyers that basically do child custody and things of that nature that had no experience in this. So that was a debacle at the end. How do you have $1.2 billion, Corey, and run out of money in October?
John, let me tell you what I think happened. In 2016 and 15, when I ran the race, I remember very vividly being on the 5th floor of Trump Tower, and a major phone vendor came into the office. And he said, Corey, I want your phone business for the campaign. And let me tell you what my proposition is. You'll pay me $25,000 a month to do this service for you, and then I'll get so many pennies for every phone call made. And I said, let me make a counter proposal to you. Every person who you see in this office is a full-time employee. I propose that we start you off at $2,500 a month answering the telephones. If you do a good job, maybe we'll promote you to responding to some mail. And he said, no, you don't understand. I don't want to come here and work full-time. I just want to be a vendor. And so what happened in 16 was we limited those vendors. And a lot of people who normally make a lot of money on campaigns were shut out. And it caused some consternation in my life, John, because I spent Donald Trump's money, which by and large in 2015 and 2016 was his money that he funded this campaign with. I spent it like it were my own. And I grew up a poor kid in Lowell, Massachusetts. So this notion that someone's going to come in and get $25,000 a month, more money than I was making running the campaign, working 18 or 20 hours a day, to just be a vendor was, astronomical to me. Fast forward to 2020. Not only do we have vendors making that kind of money, John, we had staffers, full-time employees who were also vendors. They were double dipping, John. They were making recommendations to the campaign based on what benefited them the most. In 2016, none of the full-time employees contracted to the campaign their services. Corey Lewandowski didn't own a mail shop, a direct mail firm, a phone company, a digital marketing company, or anything else. So every piece of recommendation, every piece of advice I gave to the Trump campaign to implement was what was best, what I believe was best for the campaign, agnostic of who the vendor was. Fast forward to 2020. We're going to have $1.2, $1.3 billion. And so I'm going to go stand up a company. My name is Mr. Smith, and I'm going to stand up the digital marketing company or the mail company or the phone company or whatever it was, John. And there was a vendor, and this is widely known and widely available for anyone who wants to go see it. There was a vendor in the 2020 campaign who made $100 million. $100 million, John. Now, if this were a publicly traded entity, those individuals would probably be in jail for insider trading, but it's not. It's a campaign. And there was nobody watching that. So look, you give 5 million here, 10 million there, another 100 million somewhere else. Guess what? You can blow through $1 billion when you're paying for black car service, private security, enormous amounts of overhead, thousands upon thousands of staffers, none of which had any real responsibility, but were receiving paychecks all the time. And at the end of the day, sure, did some of that money have to be spent to support the president of the United States and his reelection campaign? You bet it did. But when you have people whose ulterior motive is not necessarily to win, but to make a lot of money, you can see how that money disappears very quickly. And look, there was a change made just like in 16. At some point, President Trump decided to change the campaign manager, and the new campaign manager came in and looked at what money was left and I think was truly shocked by it. But that said, how much of the grift or the graft and the corruption and the skimming off the top has already transpired? How many people had gotten very rich? John, look, I'm probably the only person maybe in American politics or American political history who helps a candidate win 38 primaries and caucuses, become the Republican nominee, goes on to win the presidency of the United States, and is still working every day because I didn't go and take hundreds of millions or tens of millions of dollars out of a campaign. My salary was very straightforward, John, on the 2015, 2016 campaign. I negotiated a salary of $20,000 a month, $240,000 a year. I didn't make any outside money other than that. I was a full-time employee for the entity, and I'd be happy to provide, my tax returns with anybody else's who had that same role, going forward. But, the truth is, John, campaigns are a money-making business for people who know how to do it. And I think going forward, this is just Corey Lewandowski. If you're the campaign manager on a major race, you should not have the opportunity to also be the vendor to decide that you're going to do mail or phones or TV or radio or texting or doors or any other medium. You should not have that opportunity. A candidate should put that in your contract. And that's what I think would be fair and probably serve candidates much better going forward.
Corey, who was the vendor that made $100 million?
I don't want to say because it's actually a person that 99.999% of the world has never heard of. But when you think about Donald Trump's campaign in 2020, we were inundated, John, by digital communications, text messaging, emails. How many times over the course of, a day would you be inundated with another communication from the campaign? Well, the campaign didn't own that information. They were paying somebody to send that information. At what point is that too much information? At what point are they no longer valuable, or do you have a diminishing return? If you get one text message a day, maybe. If you get 40, maybe not. So the question would be, you go back and look, and where was that money spent? And was there a good return on that investment? And I think by every metric, you would have to say, no, it wasn't spent wisely. And potentially we could have saved some of that money to put lead on the target at the end of the campaign. And when you traditionally put a budget together for a campaign, you start on election day or early voting day, and you look at the places where you need to spend that money and you build it backwards. None of that transpired in 2020. And hence, I think why you saw the campaign running out of money in October of an election year.
Well, the thing that people have to realize too is every time you get one of those texts, and we've gotten so many of those, that they did become annoying. In fact, just the other day, my wife, Ann, who you know very well, said to me, I'm about one more email from unsubscribing here. But every time you get one of these texts or emails, somebody's getting paid to send that out, right? You get the cash register ringing. So you have to ask yourself, I mean, what are strategic decisions being made to maximize the effectiveness of the money spent in the campaign? Or are there people that are in the campaign that are getting a paycheck that also have ties or themselves vendor companies that basically are sending these text or emails or whatever they're sending out because every one they get paid on? And so that becomes a question. And one of the other issues that has gone on when you mentioned people doing certain things, I remember in 2016 we had a new campaign manager that came in, Paul Manafort. I was not a fan of his. The first thing that they tried to do was get rid of all the Trump loyalists, including me, right? So rather than call me up and try to figure out what was going on in Virginia, they went around me to get rid of me. I had to call up Ivanka, who saved me. This is the nonsense that went on. Then they had to do a mailing in Wisconsin, and so they started a mail house. Well, they had no experience in that, but they wanted to get the 15% or whatever it is for the mailing. So they start a mail house and then job it out. We ended up losing Wisconsin in that campaign in 2016 in the primary for a variety of reasons. But there was a question if all of the mail ever got out. These are the things that just when you're in a campaign and you go back to what you did in 2016, and that thing was lean and mean. Because I remember going on a conference call after we won Virginia with 36% or 30, I think it was 36. We beat Rubio 36-33. Mm-hmm. The only ad spending that was done in Virginia was on my radio show. That was it. Rubio spent like $5 million in the final weekend on TV. We ended up beating him. And there was a conference call the following day, which was after Super Tuesday, right?
That's right.
And I'll never forget this. This was in March. This was after Super Tuesday. There were 65 total people in the campaign in March. 65. I mean, Scott Walker had 150. And he never got through the second debate. So this thing was lean and mean. And you look at what's happening now, the fear that a lot of people have is, okay, you had a lot of grift. You had a lot of people making money on two ends. You had a lot of people that put their own personal benefit ahead of the candidate. Where are we in 2024 now?
John, it's amazing. Just this week, one of the major media outlets reached out to me and said, Corey, we've seen that you haven't donated to Donald Trump financially since he's left the White House. Does that mean you're not supporting him? And I said, the truth is my family and I have donated tens of thousands of hours, countless time helping President Trump be successful, travel on my own dime, my own meals, my own hotel stays, never asked for a reimbursement. I didn't get paid one dime from January 1st of 2016 2017. Donald Trump was the president of the United States in January 20th of 2017 until today. I've never been paid again by the Donald Trump campaign and didn't make any money from the RNC. And so, John, you have to ask yourself, can a campaign be successful if it is run by vendors who have their own interests in their own success? And that's a very legitimate question for campaigns, not just at the presidential level, but at every level. And the truth is, a number of very successful business executives have spent enormous amounts of money relying on the expertise of so-called, political consultants who run the business to profiteer themselves for. And look, Michael Bloomberg spent $1 billion. He got one delegate. I would love to have had that opportunity to go run $1 billion campaign, John, to produce one delegate. The truth is, there are very honest people in this business, and there are very dishonest people in this business. And what you referenced just a bit ago, John, about that mail shop, it was called Left-Handed Enterprises. It was determined that Paul Manafort stood this organization up, is what we seem to have found out, to do some mailing in accordance with some other consultants that he brought in when he took over, John. He didn't want you and others looking under the hood of where the money was going. And so he brought in his own team. And the reason for that was to try and manipulate and move money in such a place that they would control it and make their fee on it. Paul's original notion to Mr. Trump at the time was, I'm so rich, I don't need your money. I live in Trump Tower. I'll do this for free. Well, what we come to find out, fast forward, was that Paul has, obviously working for oligarchs in the Ukraine and other places, and had, he was in debt up to his eyes. He was borrowing or attempting to borrow money from the guys in Chicago, and so many other things. And so it was all a ruse. And so these sometimes political consultants have their own interests at heart. And look, I think if you ask people who have worked with me as candidates, they'll tell you I'm unbelievably honest. I give my advice, which I think is good advice, but I don't do it based on me profiteering, because I don't own a mail shop, John. I don't own a radio studio or a television company or a mail firm. It's important that you disclose those things. And maybe some candidates are okay with that. But I think in the grand scheme, when you're looking at $1 billion operation, if I were to run for office, John, I know who I would hire, and I would make sure that those individuals were paid a compensation, a monthly retainer that was commensurate with their experience, but that they could not go and profiteer off of any other part of the campaign. I think if candidates were to do that, you'd see a lot more candidates being successful.
You look at the Trump campaign now, 2024. Right now, you're not a part of it, as far as I can see. Hopefully someday you'll be, but right now you're not a part of it. But one of the things is, Corey, is you still have the presence here. I mean, I know for a fact that you talk to President Trump on a regular basis, and so that chafes some people because they don't like the president talking to people that are not within the inner circle of the campaign. What is your relationship now with the president? Because I know you talk to him several times a week. Does he ask for your advice, your input on certain things?
John's amazing. And without revealing, a private conversation with President Trump, I will tell you this. My conversation with President Trump almost always start the same way. Hello, sir. How are you? He says, great. And he'll say, Corey, how do you think I'm doing? And I'll say, sir, I can either tell you the truth or I can tell you what you want to hear. It doesn't matter to me. Which one do you want today? And every single time he says, tell me the truth. And then when I tell him the truth on matters, and because, John, I'm not on payroll, I consider, and maybe this is naive on my part, I consider Donald Trump a friend of mine, someone who I trust and respect, and has been a friend of mine now for more than 8 years. And we have been through the wars together, the battles together. He says, Corey, tell me the truth. And I'll say, sir, I think this is going well, or this isn't going well. I think maybe if you said it this way, it would be better, or maybe you shouldn't say that. And look, sometimes the president takes my advice, sometimes he doesn't. But what chafes the staff, John, and I've been on that side too, okay, I've been on that side, is the staff wants to control Donald Trump. The staff wants to manage Donald Trump. I wrote this little book, John, that you are familiar with. It says, Let Trump Be Trump. Because back in 2015 and 2016, what I learned was I am working for a billionaire, someone who has made more money than I will ever make in my life, someone who has enormous name recognition, someone who has incredible political instincts. And it was never my job to change Donald Trump. I used to say it was like being a jockey on American Pharaoh or on a Triple Crown winner, right? You get on, you ride as hard as you can, you put the blinders on, you guide him into the corners, but you let him run. And that's who Donald Trump is. For all of the things that people chastise about him, he is an incredible communicator. He understands how to talk to people. And the staff doesn't like when someone like me has direct access to Donald Trump and says, Mr. President, I think you should be out talking to the people. They want to see him in a controlled environment. It's what Paul Manafort tried to do with Donald Trump in 2016 when he came in. It's what every chief of staff tried to do. It's what John Kelly tried to do when he was in the White House. And the truth is, Donald Trump is his own best communicator. Some could argue he's his own worst enemy, John, for the things he does and says. But at the end of the day, these are his decisions. And as a staffer, which is what I have been and will always be for him, is a staffer, not a contemporary, not an equal, not a peer, but a staffer. I give him my best advice, and I hope he takes it. And I don't ever give him advice which says, Mr. Trump, I think you should stay at Mar-a-Lago, make videos, and don't go see the people. I've always said, let's get on the road. Let's go communicate. Let people see you. And you know what? Maybe you say something that others would disagree with, but that's okay. Everyone's human. And the thing that I have found, John, that people love about Donald Trump is he's a fighter. He believes what he says, and he fights for what he believes in. And look, you don't have to agree with everything he says, and nobody does. But you do have to agree that when he says something, he's going to fight for it. And when he fights for it, it matters.
Corey, I agree with you 100%. Give us your assessment of the Trump campaign right now, middle of March, second week in March, 2023. We got a long way to go. If you were, as you're looking at it now, the staff he's got in place and basically what they're doing, you mentioned putting out videos in Mar-a-Lago. Give us your assessment of where you think the campaign is right now.
John, if you believe the media, it's a well-oiled, professionally run operation, which is what they said about the 2020 campaign. They never give us the credit in 2015 and 2016 for a ragtag band of misfits who got a guy who had never run for office before or been in the military elected president of the United States. But that being said, look, I have enormous respect for the people who were at the Trump campaign. I know them all. Many of them have worked for me, John, in different capacities over the years. I think every manager has to be able to understand their candidate. And every candidate is different. Some candidates like to be managed and some candidates don't. I think what you have right now is you've got a team in place that is grinding out for a long-term fight, for potential delegate selection fights across these states, which we saw in 2015 and in 2016. It did not occur in 2020 because he was the president of the United States. That being said, look, I've said this many times. I think Donald Trump is the best when he's in front of people. I've seen him, and I believe that he has the ability to what I call turn people. When you meet him, he is so self-deprecating. He is so magnanimous. He is so gracious to people that if everybody could see the Donald Trump that I have seen in private, in public, it would never be a question of his ability to connect with people. And look, he doesn't need to do this, John. He doesn't need to go and put his fame and fortune on the line again to be chastised by the media for things. He's doing it because he wants to make this country better and leave it better for his children and his grandchildren who's left to him. And that's a noble cause. And so what I think, John, is the campaign has a long way to go. It's very early on. At this point, 8 years ago, we were just starting off, and Donald Trump came down that golden escalator in June of 2015 and then took off like a rocket ship and never looked back. We've got many debates that the RNC is going to be doing starting in August. We'll see who's on that debate stage. I think it's very different now. There's no question Donald Trump is the front runner for the Republican nomination. But there are very few candidates in modern presidential history who come out as the front runner and never look back. And, I see the expectation game with Ron DeSantis, a very successful governor in the state of Florida. He's in Iowa and Nevada this week. The expectations are continuously going through the roof. I would caution the DeSantis team by continuing to set that expectation so high, because it's very difficult to live up to. The truth is, we will know better when we see these candidates continue to get into the race. I think Tim Scott will get in. I think there will be others. And we'll see what their performance is like on the debate stage in Milwaukee in August.
But you would like to see the president get out more in smaller groups, much like you did in 2015 in New Hampshire, and then going into the winter of 2016, leading up to New Hampshire, much like you did in Iowa. So I think what I'm hearing you say is you would like to see the president get out more, not necessarily in 10,000 people rallies, but in meet and greets and in little town hall meetings and stuff where he can get up front with the people and be able to deliver his message. Is that what I've heard?
That's right, John. Look, in 2015, no one gives Donald Trump credit, but he was sitting down having intimate conversations with people about the opioid crisis in New Hampshire. It was devastating our state. And he sat down with 10 and 20 people at a time. We'd go to Cincinnati, Ohio, and Donald Trump wouldn't do a 10,000 person rally. We'd put him in what we call in the round, where there'd be 200 or 300 people around Donald Trump, and he would have a handheld microphone and just walk around in that circle answering people's questions like a town hall meeting. That's where Donald Trump is extremely effective. And I think because the media's inability to continue to cover Donald Trump's rallies, he will be much more effective communicating in those types of mediums, which is those small environments. Look, Iowa has 99 counties. I don't think Donald Trump's going to go to all 99 counties. I think we went to 11 in the 2016 campaign, but they were very important. Donald Trump went to the Iowa fairgrounds, walked around, ate a corn dog, had these massive crowds just sit there and want to listen to him. If you remember, John, we brought the helicopter in and gave huge rides. I mean, it was an experience, and you have to have fun. Listen, in 2015 and 2016, there's an old movie which Adam Sandler is called Happy Gilmore. And we were always Happy Gilmore, and we always said Jeb Bush was Shooter McGavin. He was miserable. He never wanted us on the tour. He thought it was his to take. And look, Happy Gilmore went out and was having fun all the time, even though he got into a fight with Bob Barker. So, you got to have fun on the campaign trail, John, because it's a grind. It's a gauntlet. And you have to have a good team that respects each other, that isn't leaking on each other. And what we saw at particularly the early stages of 2015 until Paul Manafort came in mid-2016 was we had a team that didn't leak on each other, that worked side by side every day for one goal, which was to help Donald Trump. That team was very small. We brought Dan Scavino in, I think, in March or April of 2015. He was one of the top 10 hires of the campaign. Brought Michael Glassner in January of 2016. We brought Stephen Miller in January or February of 2016. It was a small, tight-knit group. Sam Clovis, a very good group of people. Johnny McEntee. Everybody was there protecting each other and doing whatever it took to win, John. In 2020, there was a lot of backstabbing, a lot of stories coming out in the media about what was going on. And you can't be successful like that. So in 2024, you have to build a team that has one goal in mind. It's not to enrich themselves, but to work collectively, to be partners. And if that's what Susie and Chris and Brian, Jack, and everybody else is doing, I commend them, because it gets harder as it goes on. And Jason Miller and others understand what happens when staff is leaking to the media about other staffers. It just divides the team further and makes really an unsustainable, unwinnable organization.
Well, you look what happened when Trump got to the White House, and there was 5 leaks a day coming out of that. I remember talking to you one time about it. I was very upset with one of them. Basically, they had a private meeting, and they had leaked one of the staff members. It happened to be somebody that I was very fond of, because she was the media liaison. So she told us for the top surrogates on the Trump campaign in 2020 in media, of which I was, one of the top 5 in America, She was my go-to person. I'd call her up going on CNN when I was on a commercial at 11:25 on the Don Lemon show back then. She'd answer the phone. I say, hey, they're going to ask me this, tell us our position on it in like 60 seconds. But there was a private staff meeting, and she made a disparaging comment about Senator McCain at the time, and that immediately leaked to the Hill, and they were able to drum her out. And I remember calling you up, how upset I was over that. And this was like, the leaks just kept coming. And I never forgot what you said. You said, I would have a meeting with everybody that was in the meeting that leaked it. And I would say, you've got 15 minutes to come in my office and tell me that you leaked it and resign and give up your pass, or I'm going to fire a person a day until there's nobody remaining. Remember that?
I do, John. And look, people think I'm a hard guy to work with. The truth is, if you love to work, then you love working with me. But John, the truth is, in situations like this, I would do it all the time. I would be on the phone with somebody and they'd say, well, Johnny told me this or Billy told me that. I'd put them both on the phone call together, right? I'd merge them together. Say, okay, yeah, I got you both on the phone now. What's the truth? And one of them would end up in the mumble tank. No. Because, John, if you don't call these people out, they continue to do it. They trade on information, John, because they think it helps them. And how many people who portrayed themselves as Trump loyalists, Trump supporters, Trump friends, worked inside the White House only to write a tell-all book or to write something disparaging of him after, or to go on television after and beat up him and the First Family and others. How many people, John, did we see?
That's incredible.
And it continues to this day. Look, I mean, I've got nothing personal against Ken Cuccinelli, nothing. And you know Cooch very well. He was the former AG of Virginia, right? And what did he do yesterday? He launched a super PAC to ask Ron DeSantis to get into the race for president of the United States. This guy, who I know very well, was a senior member of the Department of Homeland Security and was hoping to be the White House counsel in the second term. John, how many more of those people out there never really supported Donald Trump? And how many that are working for him today? And I ask the president this question often. Sir, if you didn't pay them, would they still return your phone call? And he's asked me that question. Corey, if I didn't pay Mr. Smith or Mrs. Jones, do you think they'd return my call? And my response is, sir, what do you think? And he'd say, yeah, I know they wouldn't, but what are you going to do? And I think part of it is he's relegated to the fact that some of these people are going to go attack him. And John, I have had the privilege to be with Donald Trump in some amazing situations, both good and bad. And I recall a particular incident. It was the day that they were flying John McCain's body from Arizona back to Washington, D.C. And we were at a rally that day. And the rally was supposed to start right at the same time that the media was covering the removal of the casket to put it into the hearse, to bring it to the Capitol to allow Senator McCain to lay in state. A very important moment. And I was in the rally. We were about to start the rally, and we postponed the starting so everyone could wait. And Donald Trump was in the room. He was watching this, and there was a very, very small group of people, and I mean 5 people there with him. And obviously, President Trump and John McCain were not close friends. There was a lot of animosity between the two. And Mr. Trump, then President Trump, started to say a few things. I said, sir, just stop. I said, hang on a second, just wait a minute. And I turned to the other people in the room. I said, get out. And he said, well, Corey, you know who that is. That's, Bobby and Mary and Mikey and Johnny and Susie and whoever their names were. And I said, oh, I know who they are, sir. I know who every single one of them is. And I don't trust them, and I don't want them in the room. Because if you're going to say something, I don't want it reported in a week from now or a day from now or a year from now in a book. And John, I was a volunteer. I asked all those staffers to leave the room, and Donald Trump could sit there and say anything he wanted out loud or in private, and it never got reported. It was never retold. And the staff was, they were incredulous. You don't work here. You don't tell me what to do. And I said, yeah, I don't care. Because if there were more people doing that for Donald Trump when he was in the White House, then we would have had less leaks and less backstabbing, and we would have had a much more successful administration, in my opinion.
Well, you're right about that. And I'm glad you cleared the room, because the leaks and the tell-all books and everything else that people made money off was just disgusting. I do want to mention that the person I talked about earlier who got drummed out over the leak to the Hill was Kelly Sadler, who did a fabulous job. She was one of the top people there. And when they leaked that to the Hill, I mean, this was in a private staff meeting. You have to be able to talk freely with the door closed. And within hours, it got leaked to the Hill. And, she ended up having to resign. And that really hurt the White House communications because she was really one of the best people there and very loyal, intensely loyal also. Let's get to Ken Cuccinelli because this ties in, Corey, to a bigger picture. Both of us fought Cuccinelli hand-to-hand combat in 2015 and 2016 for Cruz, right? And of all the Never Trumpers, Cuccinelli was the most vicious of all of them. And remember, he went to Cleveland and he tried to get stack rules and they tried to unbound the delegates. These were delegates that were pledged to Trump because Republican voters in primaries had voted for the president. So the delegates were bound. Cuccinelli tried to come into Cleveland, thwart and overturn the wishes of primary voters, unbind the delegates so they could somehow pull us out from Cruz, right? We all remember that. I had to follow him around. I was a shadow in Cleveland. He would talk to NBC. I was behind him. I talked to NBC and disputed what he said. He talked to MSNBC. I talked to him. He talked to CNN. I talked to CNN. Thing was a nightmare beyond belief. I was the whipping rules. It was unbelievable. But when he got when they were looking at hiring him as a senior official in the White House, I remember telling anybody making that decision that would listen to me that this guy will stab you in the back. He's a never Trumper. He hates us. There's so many people that could have filled that position that were very loyal to us, that understood the movement, and we're giving it to a guy that hates us and is a avowed never Trumper. Yet they put him in the position anyway. I'm sure he did a fine job. But now he comes out and he stabs us in the back again. What did they think was going to happen? Just let me ask you this. What did they think was going to happen with this guy? And why do they keep putting people in Trump orbit that hate him? Can you explain that to me?
John, there's an old saying I used to hear from my grandmother, right? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And that's where we are. Look, Ken Cuccinelli is an exceptionally brilliant attorney, actually. He's very smart. And that's what makes him all the more dangerous. He almost had the ability in 2016 to take the nomination away from Donald Trump because he was so smart on how the delegate selection process worked and to unbind those delegates. Ultimately, it didn't happen. But listen, here's what happens, John, and it's so unfortunate. What happens is Donald Trump has a conversation with somebody and they say, Mr. President, you're the greatest. I've always loved you. Boy, it'd be amazing if I could come work for you. And he says, oh, this guy loves me. Let's go hire him. Right? We've done this with multiple individuals throughout the administration, only to find out that, they never supported him. They never respected him, and they just wanted, what they wanted and to benefit themselves. And so I hope, John, that, look, many of those matters were resolved when John McEntee was put in charge of presidential personnel. John McEntee is a very loyal, very smart guy. He walked in off the street one day into Trump Tower and said, hey, Mr. Lewandowski, you don't know me, but I want to come and volunteer for you every single day and work in this office to help Donald Trump get elected. What do you think? And I said, how much? And he said, volunteer. I said, best price, you're in. Yes. And so, but Johnny knew who the loyal people were, and it got better by and large as the administration went on. But for the first, John, 3 years, we couldn't get loyalists into the Trump administration. We had people who were staffing there who were actively campaigning against him, saying things against him on television all the time. And we still see it, John. We see reporters, self-identified journalists, authors, pick a guy who says, hey, I'm writing a book, Mr. Trump. I've blown you up 700,000 times on TV, but would you mind if I sit down with you? And he says, sure, come on in. Bob Woodward, who's the guy who wrote Rage, right? That that whole book. I mean, there's so many, and that's what happens, and it makes people like me cringe. It makes the hair on my arm stand up, John, that it continues to happen. And maybe the government, with the 4,000 plus presidential appointments that you have to fill, you just have to have some of these people. But you would think by now we would be staffing organizations and people who actually want to see Donald Trump be successful. And I can't tell you how many times I had the privilege to sit in the White House across the Resolute desk from Donald Trump and have him say to a staffer, "I'd like you to do this," or "Please do that." And I'd walk out of the room and the staffer would turn to me and say, "I'm not doing that. I don't feel like it. He's crazy. He'll forget." I said, "The President of the United States just gave you a lawful order and asked you to go execute something." "Yeah, I'm not doing that." And it was mind numbing to me, John, because at the end of the day, the way I have always operated is your name, Donald Trump, is on the door. Your name, Governor Smith, is on the door. Your name, Senator so-and-so, is on the door. So if I work for you, I bring you recommendations. I bring you the final decision. Whatever the decision is that you make, as far as I'm concerned, that's the final decision as long as it's legal. If you tell me to do something that's legal, I walk away. You tell me, "Hey, this is what I want done." Even if I don't agree, John, it's not my name on the door. And I think that's what sets me apart from so many other people in the Trump world who just decided they would do whatever they wanted because they worked in the White House or because they were close to Donald Trump. And it didn't matter what he wanted. And because of that, we had a lot more problems in Washington, D.C.
How do we get rid of the grifters?
Look, I think the easiest solution is if you're going to work on the Trump campaign, the 2024 Donald Trump campaign, you are negotiated a salary. Your salary is your magic number. If you want to factor in a bonus, by all means, please go do that. But you have to sign a legal document that says you have no other outside income, John. Maybe rental property, okay, if you've got houses or whatever, but you're not getting paid by the RNC and 16 other campaigns for the Trump endorsement. You don't own a mail shop, a direct mail company, a digital marketing firm, a TV company, or whatever it is, right? Because if you do that, then 100% of your time is tied to the campaign. And if your actual compensation is determined by the success of the candidate, then guess what? You're going to work a little harder. And almost every candidate I work with, John, whether it's the local dog catcher candidate, candidates for Congress, governors, senators, whatever it may be, I say, listen, I got to live like you do. You pay me a monthly retainer, which we agree is a fair amount, whatever that number is, $5,000, $8,000, $2,000, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Once that number is agreed to, that's my compensation. But if and when you win, and you're going to win because I'm going to manage your campaign, you're going to pay me a number commensurate with my experience to help you win. And when you win, you don't care. And if you lose, you know what I get? Nothing. Bupkis. Zero. My incentives are aligned with you. And you know what every candidate I work for says? "Oh my God, I love that idea." And I say, and when you win, I'm going to make it hurt. You're going to pay me a number that's going to hurt you. It's going to be painful. But you know what? If you lose, you don't care. And then what they all say, "Corey, we love that idea." Yes, please set that up. You do that, John, on a presidential campaign, on a gubernatorial campaign, on a U.S. Senate campaign. We're electing more Republicans every single day than the guys who are taking a monthly retainer and having you hire their company to do all the work, and they're making money on both ends.
And the mail and the text and the emails and the TV ads, the broadcast ads, the digital media, the Facebook ads. I mean, it goes on and on and on, getting a percentage of that. So you're double dipping in two ends. And then the other problem that really comes in is the incentive to win is diminished by the incentive to spend money and make the commission in your side company instead of, does that make sense or not? And of course, we've seen that. I don't want to go into it right now, but I've seen that myself with various people recommending things that you just scratch your head and like, well, why would they recommend that? And then you find out it's because they own the company, or they got a piece of it, or they're getting the commission on it, or they're placing the digital ads or something of that nature. All right. Couple other things. I know we're getting a little short on time. You've got the things to do. Ron DeSantis. I'm taking Ron DeSantis, Corey, very seriously. He's got a lot of money. He's tied up the major donors, Griffin and others on Wall Street. He's the gangster bankster darling candidate right now. The money this guy's raising with in a campaign that hasn't started yet, he can't announce until after Florida State House is over, because they have to pass the law that says that he can run for president without resigning. But he's raising an inordinate amount of money, and he's got a very strong record to run on as governor. He's been an extraordinary governor, no question about it. And one of the other things that I want to point out here is when we fought Cruz at the end, he was the only one standing because the Kasich, we used to call him what? One state Johnny, one win Johnny. Remember that? We
won for 49 John. Yeah, and we should have won Ohio, by the way. It was
one in 49 John. So we never took him seriously. But we did take Cruz seriously. He did win that time in Wisconsin, and then we had to annihilate him in New York. But the thing is, Cruz never had this kind of money. That's number one. Second thing is, Ted Cruz, when you meet him, his appeal goes down. I mean, the guy is just not personable. And a lot of people would meet him and they just couldn't stand the guy, right? He was kind of a miserable human being on a personal basis. And so you bring him into a meeting and he would turn people off for whatever reason. That's just his personality, not his fault. DeSantis is quite the opposite. He's very engaging. People like him. He's personable. He's also got the first lady of Florida, Cassidy, is an absolute killer. Don't underestimate that. They got a wonderful family. They take them around. How serious is the DeSantis threat to us in 2024?
John, if anybody does not take Ron DeSantis and his campaign team seriously, they will do so at their own peril. And the truth is, Susie Wiles, who is now in charge of the Trump campaign for a period of time, ran a campaign against Ron DeSantis for Adam Putnam for governor. Ron beat Adam Putnam in that nomination, and then she went to the DeSantis campaign to help him ultimately be successful against Gillum. So she understands that Ron is not someone to be underestimated. But more importantly than that, the difference with Ron DeSantis and the 2016 campaign, where a lot of the institutional donors were with Jeb Bush. I think they felt the loyalty to George W. Bush and the Bush family, so they had to go there. There's no real alternative right now to Ron DeSantis for the institutional donor. That's not to say maybe there couldn't be. I don't think Mike Pence has the ability to raise the money that Ron DeSantis is raising. I don't think Nikki Haley will. Mike Pompeo, I have enormous respect for. I don't think he's going to have those resources available to him. And so as you look at who the potential candidates would be to get into the race, I believe Governor DeSantis has not a monopoly, but clearly a plurality of the major donors who are saying, we like what you've been doing in Florida. We think you are an opportunity to challenge Donald Trump for whatever reason. And they are funding him at a significant level. Look, it's been widely reported that one particular donor gave Ron DeSantis $10 million. John, that's a deposit. If you can write a $10 million check, you didn't give it all to the guy in the first time. And so as it relates to his ability to compile a very serious campaign with serious players, and I know them. I know his team very well. The truth is, one of his senior strategists had been a friend of mine for 20 years. I mean, he hired me, and then we've worked together, and then we've worked separately. We've been on the other side of races. He's a very, very capable guy. And Ron has Governor DeSantis, Casey DeSantis, they have enormous discipline. They're on this book tour right now, and that's not by mistake. They're in Iowa. They're in Nevada. Those states weren't chosen at random. You don't see them in Utah and South Dakota right now. You see them in places where there are early state voters. I think you will see Governor DeSantis in my home state of New Hampshire. You will see him in South Carolina. I think he's going to compete. And I don't think he'll make the mistake that my friend Rudy Giuliani made, which was, let's just sit back on our laurels, wait for the primaries to come to Florida, and then win in Florida. I think if Governor DeSantis gets in this race, and I believe he will be competing in every state. He doesn't have to win every state. Remember, Ted Cruz won in Iowa. Donald Trump won New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada. But look, Rick Santorum, when he ran in 2012, won 11 primaries and caucuses and stayed till the end. There is a path, because once you're in that situation, you're down to a 1 or 2 person race, you will continue to get money. You will continue to get earned media. And I think Ron DeSantis has that ability to generate earned media. The crowd I saw today in Iowa was 1,500 people in a morning event. That tells me there's an excitement there. Does it continue? We don't know. Is it there today? It is.
Well, I tell you, for one, Corey, I'm taking the Ron DeSantis for president campaign very seriously. I think this is he's not. I think I agree with you. He's certainly not to be underestimated. He's very disciplined. He's on a mission. He's got a lot of money behind him. He's so far hiring pretty good people from what I've seen behind the scenes. And I think it's going to be a dogfight. And what I've told our team, our loyalists, people that want to see Trump be the nominee, is this is going to be a fight. You got to get 2,200 delegates in Milwaukee, and you better be ready for trench warfare. Lace them up and lace them tight. We're not going to get coronated. You're going to have to fight this out, and you're going to have to be very smart about it, because he's got a lot of money to spend, and we're likely in these early primaries to get outspent on broadcast media significantly. Not even 10% or 20%. I'm talking 2 or 3 to 1, and so we'll have to do that. I want to get on my final question. Nobody knows the Granite State, New Hampshire, Corey, better than Corey Lewandowski does. You started there. You've been there your whole life. You were in the state police there. You also started out as the New Hampshire chairman for AFP a long time ago. So you really know the state. A lot of people are saying, looking at some numbers until recently, that was really DeSantis's best shot early. How do you see New Hampshire playing out, Corey?
Look, John, New Hampshire is a place where Donald Trump won by 17 points in 2015, 2016. It was early of 2016 because he was here all the time. John McCain did over 150, I think, town hall meetings. He won the state. It is a state that asks and demands candidates to come here and not just rely on broadcast television or text messages or other mediums of phones or mail. People want to see you. They want to talk to you. They want to feel you. They want to have conversations with you. Donald Trump has been to New Hampshire already once. He spoke at the Republican State Party convention that we had here in Salem, New Hampshire. And the truth is, I'm going to expect and hope that he comes to New Hampshire often, because New Hampshire has a history of rewarding candidates who show up. Ron DeSantis has not been here yet. Mike Pence is coming here next Wednesday. I don't think that former Vice President Pence is going to win the state, even though he's very close to Governor Sununu. I don't think ultimately Chris Sununu, the sitting governor of New Hampshire, gets in the presidential race either, because I don't think in a Republican primary he would win. So this race in New Hampshire is wide open and will be decided by which candidate wants to come here. Remember, the day after Donald Trump came down that golden escalator, he was in the state of New Hampshire asking for their support. He campaigned here in between Iowa, the Iowa caucus in New Hampshire. Every single day, he flew here immediately from Iowa and campaigned 7 days straight and really prevented that second place finish in Iowa to further slide and go right into first place. And once he won New Hampshire, John, the stage was set. Most people don't remember. Bill Clinton was dubbed the comeback kid in New Hampshire. He didn't actually win the state. Paul Tsongas won it, the neighboring U.S. senator, in 1992. But the comeback kid, Bill Clinton, came back. Obviously, his electoral success is now well known. But, New Hampshire has a history of picking the right candidates, but they will only do that if they think you put the time in. The Democrats have taken New Hampshire away from the First of the Nation primary. It will still occur. By our state law, it is mandated. Maybe the Democrats sanction their delegates. That's up to them. The Republicans want to come and vet the candidates. They want to look at them. They want to shake their hands, and then they'll pick the right person for president.
Corey, I want to give you the final word here on our inaugural podcast, Trump This Inside the Trump campaign to save America in 2024. So I'm going to give you the final word, Corey. If you were talking to President Trump right now, giving him advice about 2024 in this campaign, and you had just a minute and a half, what would it be?
First, John, let me say thank you for having me on this inaugural podcast. It's fantastic. And I'm so pleased that you asked me to come on, and, I'm such a big fan. As it relates to my advice to Donald Trump, it's the same I'd always give him. Have fun, enjoy what you're doing, surround yourself with the people who, care about you and want to see you be successful. Don't give in to what their demands are if you don't agree with them. The reason I think Donald Trump and I, President Trump, Mr. Trump, candidate Trump, President-elect Trump, post-President-elect Trump, have always had a strong personal relationship is because I've never tried to ask him to do something I didn't think he wanted to do. I've never asked him to go and say something or be someone he wasn't. And look, it's not for me, as I've said, to tell the voters what Donald Trump should or shouldn't be saying. That's Donald Trump's job. It's my job to let him know what is honestly happening out there. I think from what I've seen, being the president and being a candidate for president is a very lonely job. You don't get to interact with a lot of people on a personal level. And I think you surround yourself sometimes with people who just want to say yes because they want to continue making money from you. So my advice to President Trump is, sir, be yourself. Do what you think the right thing to do is. Go out and talk to people no one communicates with the people better than you do. You've got a great, great finger on the pulse of what this country needs. Go out and articulate what the future holds for us and let everyone know our best days are still in front of us.
Corey Lewandowski, I want to thank you, as always, for being with us. And if people don't know this, when Trump first got elected and went to Washington, I really wanted to cover it. I wanted to get into be a White House correspondent, be able to go to the press briefings every day, do my show up there. And so I was able eventually get a hard pass and do that. It was a tremendous experience. And I also got called on a lot, but a lot of people probably don't know that when I first went there, this is, some time ago, Ann and I were still starting out. Company was still, okay, but struggling, didn't have a lot of extra money. And so I told Corey I needed a studio. So he gave me his home in his townhouse, but not in the basement. My studio was on his dining room table in between the foyer and the coffee and the kitchen. And so for 4 years, that's where my studio was, in Corey's home, in the kitchen, on the table. And I used to clear things out when they'd want to have supper. So, and I also stayed with them. That's where I lived. So, Corey, I want to thank you for that. Okay, big question, and then we'll go. Will the Red Sox make the playoffs?
Hey, John, we're hot this season. We're undefeated until like a day ago, I think. Look, here's my problem, John. You and I have made a bet on playoffs. I had to pay out on tickets, right? I always pay my bets. I always do. You've got a hot team. You got Mattress Mac down there making, $10 million on sporting events. I don't know how he does it, but the guy's always picking the right team. So I like the Red Sox. I do. But I'll tell you, John, this. My nephew was playing Division I baseball. I was down at Florida Gulf Coast University last week watching him pitch. He pitched a complete game last week at George Mason against George Mason. So, I've been watching a lot of college baseball so I can watch my nephew play Division I college ball. Sometimes baseball got a little political. They got a little too much into politics for me a few years ago. So I've taken a little step back on baseball. I still love the Sox. They're my home team. But right now I'm rooting for my college alma mater because my nephew's pitching.
Well, we'll see what happens. My son, Joe, who I'm here in Florida, he pitched and closed the game out for his team yesterday. He goes to West Virginia University starting in June. So he'll be there next year. Maybe the two will play in the spring. We'll have to see. But I did win the bet on the Sox Astros, I guess the playoffs. And you did give me the 2 playoff tickets for Joe and I. It was game number 3 and 4. You gave me tickets for the 2 games. They lost game 3 and then knocked the Red Sox out in game 4. And Joe and I stayed until the end. We went on top of the Red Sox dugout and did our victory dance and sent the video to Corey Lewandowski.
Altuve, man, you can't beat the guy. He's like a machine. He's 5 feet tall, and the guy just gets a hit every single time. He's amazing.
All I remember is we danced on the Red Sox dugout and sent Corey the video. That was kind of mean, though. I'll say that. Corey, thank you. Thank you for being with us, and we look forward to talking to you soon. And that concludes the inaugural edition of Trump This. I'll see you soon.